Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Denise Demese with the Office of Faculty Development with the USG, and we are so happy to have you here with us today. I know a lot of folks are wrapping up fall semester and starting to think about spring and what that's going to look like. And so I'm really happy to have Jennifer Knott and Randy Garver here with us from Columbus State University to talk about back to the classroom, moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you two.
Much, and thank you everybody for being here today. We're very excited about sharing this, and I hope that you'll be able to get something out of it. So we're going to share our story from CSU and what that was like moving back to the face-to-face classroom, what has happened over this fall leading up to now, and then look at possibilities for moving forward into the spring 2021 semester. So the situation for CSU heading into the fall were that faculty were given instructions to start thinking about that face-to-face classroom. We're gonna leave our online enclave and we're gonna return to the classroom, start thinking about what that's gonna look like, and what considerations needed to be put into place there. We also knew that because of the safety concerns, that faculty and students both needed some flexibility and how they were going to be present and how they were going to attend and be engaged. So we have a poll question for everybody. How have you been teaching this fall? And Denise is going to put that poll up there. The questions are all your students face-to-face for every class meeting? Do you have some students face-to-face, or are your classes completely online?
All right, looks like the votes have stopped rolling in, so I'll go ahead and share that.
Looks like most of you, very similar to our experience, as some students are face-to-face and some students are online. And that may include for some folks that some of the students are attending online asynchronously. It might mean that some students are attending synchronously, but virtually from home. So it's good to know that we're seeing some similarities there as well.
Well, in this transition for us here at Columbus State to going back onto campus, as you can imagine, there was some trepidation from some, and there was also just a great deal of work to be done. And so a familiar message we've heard over the last few months here in the way of wearing masks, washing your hands, physical distancing. Here in this image, you can be able to see a poster that has been put up on one of the walls here in our building. And we have signage that has been placed throughout campus. And the signage is reminding people of wearing a mask, washing your hands, indicating in some places where if there was usually a line that you might be waiting in, indicating how far people should be waiting behind each other. And also just reminders of if you're feeling sick, what you should do, including we have a whole program set up for indicating to your supervisor or to other people to someone if you're feeling sick and just what to do on that. And then faculty and staff were also able to apply for accommodations if they had certain health concerns or risks that they might need to be then maybe staying home, that through a doctor, if that was officially requested through a doctor, that those could be granted as well. And so there's a great deal of work that Columbus State over the last few months has put into this return to campus. But even still, there was concern on the part of some faculty and staff about the health and safety going back onto campus. In fact, there was an open letter that was written by faculty that was addressed to the university and to USG expressing this concern. And so there's just a great deal of work on all sides here, and just wonder and concern about what was going to happen once we got back onto campus.
So even though there were those concerns, those shared concerns, our building services and UITS department worked to look at the lecture halls to see what the needs were there. They came in and installed better cameras, better microphones. They installed the plexiglass screens, and then updated computer software to make sure that live streaming and also the recording of those lectures could be done and carried out for students who were not able to attend in real time. They also looked at some of the rooms and looked at enrollments. Can some of those lecture halls hold all the students for a class, or is there going to be a need to look at dividing student rosters? So some of the faculty members had to look at figuring out how many students can I fit into this room, and how can I make arrangements for the students to attend live virtually, and then some of them attend in the face-to-face classroom, and then maybe switch those around. So there was a wide variety of considerations there for folks.
Well, for us in the Center of Online Learning here at Columbus State, we wanted to see what could we do to be able to help prepare faculty for this more flexible approach to teaching. Even if you are used to fully online teaching, which some of our faculty were, this is definitely a different mindset to be able to do both, to have some form or fashion of having students in the classroom while having students online at the same time. And so we knew that there was going to be work that needed to be done, and professional development and training that we needed to be able to offer our faculty members. And so we did a few different things. One of them was that we had a month-long training scheduled. We had a course in our learning management system that we refer to as Cougar View. And we created this course called the Quick Start course. And it was intended to do a few different things, including if for faculty who hadn't taught as much in the past online, that it could acquaint them more with our learning management system and how to use that. But also we spent a week as part of that month focusing on more flexible teaching, hybrid teaching. And that included introducing faculty members to in a teaching approach that many have heard about over the last few months. This is called HyFlex, or hybrid flexible teaching. It's a method that was created by Dr. Brian Beatty from San Francisco State University. It's an approach that he's been using for a number of years there with a program that's more directed towards graduate students and working professionals. And so it's one that allows for students to be in class, but also to be online at the same time, joining through synchronous sessions, as well as being able to watch a recording of the class session later on. And because of that flexibility, it's become quite popular, or much more well-known over the last few months, as you can imagine. And so we actually used, there's an ebook that's available for free. And so we incorporated that into our course that we were, the training course we were doing with faculty. And we also reached out to Dr. Beatty and asked him if he'd be willing to speak with our faculty, and he was. And so back in July, we had a live session where he was able to share a little bit more about this teaching approach, and in particular, how might it be adapted to our specific times here with COVID and social distancing, and what this might look like, since it would not be we would not be using the exact same approach as normally happens because of social distancing and other requirements. But the flexibility that's built in is what we were really seeking after. And so he's very gracious with his time and was able to talk to our faculty and answer their questions. So another thing that we did was we led a session from a classroom to demonstrate what this kind of teaching approach could look like. And so we had someone in one of the classrooms be able to lead a session while we had other staff in our center be either at home or in their office. And we were doing this in conjunction with our University Information Technology Services office. And so some of them participated or role played as being students in the classroom. And so we also had 70 faculty members join this session to be able to see and have this demonstrated for them. What could this teaching approach look like? And so with having these different trainings together and these different opportunities to demonstrate and be able to help faculty see what this could look like. And I should mention also that UITS, they then also worked with faculty to get them set up in the classrooms and give them opportunities to simulate and practice this. that over the during the month of July and into August, then we were able to train a number of faculty and prepare them better for what this could look like in the beginning, or in when the semester started in August.
So that brings us forward to the current status at CSU. CSU's self-reported and documented cases total at 72 currently. Looking back at September, the number of reported cases was 9, and then the number of reported cases for October has gone down to 3. So based on the recommendations from the COVID team here at CSU, and all the precautions and recommendations that have been, the signage that has been put up and all of the watching and the waiting, these things have appeared to have prevented the spread. So we're seeing the numbers kind of trend downward. And with the number of cases going down, the decision was made to move into stage 4, the return to campus stage. And this is where all staff will be present 100% unless there's a specific approved accommodation to continue teleworking there. But still, the recommendations are in place. Signage is still there. Everyone's trying to be very careful. So if you feel sick, stay home. We're all familiar with these. If you must come to campus, wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, take your temperature, all of those things. And then apply for a telecommuting status if you need to. So that's our current status there.
So in preparing for the spring and going forward, in preparing for the spring and going forward, we wanted to find out how well are things actually working as far as the teaching side of things. It's great that the spread seems to have been contained, or that we're doing well there, but we wanted to hear from our faculty members, how well do you feel this is working in general? And so we emailed out to some of the faculty we had been working with over the last few months, and we sent them 4 different questions. We'll show those to you in just a moment. But we asked them to either respond to the email and just to answer through that, or to reach out to us so we could be able to interview them online and be able to just talk with them and get their thoughts on what was working well and maybe what could be improved on, and how could we be able to better prepare for the springtime.
Okay, so these are the questions that we asked faculty, and this is going to sort of inform the rest of the information we're going to be sharing with you. We asked them, what has worked for you and what has not worked? How well does teaching in this manner allow you to establish a sense of community in your class? So we were curious about the kind of going back and forth, the students going back and forth between home and coming to the face-to-face classroom, and how that impacted and or helped establish a sense of community. Do students, whether in class or online, feel connected to you and other students in the class if they're attending asynchronously versus synchronously, and how is all of that impacting a sense of connection there between students and between students and instructors? And then finally, how well do you feel that this form of teaching works for having students on campus while still being sufficiently socially distant? So imagining lecture halls with students sitting 6 feet apart, is that impactful as far as students and being able to learn, and the instructors being able to connect with students at all? So those are some of the things we looked at there.
So let's start with the last question we had listed there in the abbreviated version here: are classroom arrangements and precautions working? Because this is really one of the biggest questions to ask on this, right? Is do you feel that this is safe, that this is, it's good to be in this environment? And we heard back from our faculty members that we talked to that yes, it was. They indicated that students were wearing masks and they were socially distanced in the classroom. And again, as Dr. Knott had mentioned earlier, the fact that the classrooms themselves had been set up so that it would be indicated where students could or could not sit. In many cases, in some cases, rooms that maybe would not usually be used as classrooms, larger lecture halls, student classes were put into those rooms so that you could still have the number of students that were going to be in there, but they wouldn't have to be any more spread out, or I should say they wouldn't have to be divided up. You could have the entire class in that room. And so there was a great deal of work done to make sure that social distancing was in place. And as we see here from these comments from professors, that students were generally wearing their masks, and that they were, that for instance, professor number 5 here that we heard back from, he says he felt fine in the classroom. What was actually somewhat surprising with this question was unless we were kind of directly asking them this, they didn't really bring this up very much. This wasn't the biggest concern to them. The health was already, they were satisfactory as far as the health. There was a different wrinkle that actually came up during the interviews that was more surprising.
Yes, there was a new wrinkle and a surprise that we found from talking to these instructors, and that is while students started out attending and students were being strong about attending and switching back and forth, that over time, that regardless of mode, the students started to kind of disappear. In other words, students were not showing up to the face-to-face classes as much as they had been, and they were not showing up online as much as they had been. So we were curious about, well, what is impacting that, of all the things that could be impacting it? What is causing this non-engagement to happen? So in addition to the interviews that we had with our faculty members and our student assistants, we did look for and found some very recent research that was done in this fall. There are 3 sources here that we will be pulling from in the coming slides. One of the sources is the Journal of Social Studies and Educational Research. One of them is the Quarterly Review of Distance Education, and finally from the Chronicle of Higher Education. So we went looking for similarities in what we were finding, and we did find some similarities, and we'll be touching on those as we go through.
So one of the things that we started to hear from some faculty, or one of the most common themes we hear was, as far as what is working and what's not working, is there's simply too much flexibility overall. And that more students over time are attending the class virtually, that there was almost this progression from they maybe start to come into the classroom, and over time they decide not to, or they would not be coming to the class as much, and maybe they just watch online. And then even from there, they would decide to not watch online as much and simply watch the recording later. And so as this progression, or depending on how you wish to look at it, this digression would take place, their engagement would go down as well, and their performance in the class would as well. And so, for instance, these are some of the comments from one of the professors here. And as we look in the research, we know similar findings, especially from students.
Okay, just continuing on from one of the research articles that we found, one of the students says that being at home makes it seem like assignments are not as important. So that was a very interesting finding, that the students themselves are commenting on how it feels to be going to class at home, regardless of whether attending from synchronously from a live session or just being at home working on the computer and doing the assignments. So this student just commented that being at home, so if you look at the contrast to that, does that mean that making the effort to come to campus, to show up at a certain time in the classroom, is going to make those assignments feel more important? Or really, are we talking about the student feeling more engaged during that time when they're actually traveling to class and coming to class at a certain time? So that's something that is interesting that we can look at more.
So the same professor, and again, continuing themes we were seeing from other professors as well, was noting that in particular, this issue was happening with more undergraduate students. Particularly, we were seeing this with lower classmen or freshman students. One faculty member indicated that, or noting that with faculty who are or freshmen, this is still newer to them for the college experience, that undergraduate students started coming to class less, and their attendance they were suggesting that they need to be more mandatory as far as the required attendance. Graduate students seem to be more okay with this. They're able to maybe, if they need to for health reasons or for other reasons miss a class, they're more likely to be coming back afterwards still, and to still focus on and understanding what their needs are as far as the classroom and being engaged. And this is something that, as we spoke with Dr. Brian Beatty back in July, that he brought this up, that when this more hybrid flexible model is used with undergraduates, they tend to go a little more towards just watching online and streaming versus prioritizing coming to the classroom. And that this especially is true as if they're going to be doing this in courses that are more general education, not part of their major, and that they may prioritize these less or prioritize that work less than they might their major courses, or that graduate students might prioritize the courses they're in.
So the consideration of if students are given the option to join, if they're given the option to come to a face-to-face class or to join online, or if they're just going to sign in into an asynchronous class and do assignments, students active with synchronous meetings or watching recordings began to stop attending or watching, so that we are finding here. One of the other instructors that we talked to commented on how much that person had to focus on engagement with online students. So the moving to online, there's a concern that these online students may not be as engaged as the ones sitting in the face-to-face classroom. So focusing on that engagement, trying to help that student stay involved, rather than setting a requirement for attendance online, that may have had a negative impact on student engagement. So it was the not requiring that attendance that was suspect, that may have had a negative impact. So.
As we talked to as we talked to some of these different faculty members, we did see that there was variation in what was being required as far as coming to the classroom or even to online sessions. That some faculty were requiring it and made it clear to students. Others were leaving it more up to the discretion of the students, especially indicating to them that the priority was on that flexibility and on their health, which of course is important. But that there were some cases where they might offer it or indicate there was an option more indirectly, but that also students were simply able to see that other students were joining online. And so in some cases, if it was not being directly stated, you need to be here, students were able to recognize that there was that option available to them, whether or not it had been specifically stated.
So again, the question comes up. Given the option, can students keep up and stay engaged when they are allowed to choose the mode, when they're given the choice of how they will be engaged and what they will, how they will interact with the class? So again, looking at the evidence of the research that we were looking at for this fall, we do have some quotes here from the research. So Kevin Gannon states that given the choice, students aren't necessarily opting for the mode that would best advance their own learning. So that maybe at this point in time, students are trying out different modes and they're not quite yet aware or have not yet learned what's going to be best for them as far as their own learning. Then from Trout, students who do not possess the self-discipline required in online courses can become intimidated, demotivated, and consequently drop the course. So these are situations that could be impactful on student engagement and motivation here. And then finally, also from the research, that over time, students formed an awareness of their inability to change the circumstances. This is referring to the circumstances of the pandemic. So over time, on top of dealing with the pandemic, there was this back and forth for students and their ability just to kind of stay motivated in general because of everything that was kind of coming together there. So these are some things to consider and think about, the impact of all of this on the students, and in addition to the engagement factor and wanting to be engaged and maybe having some of those struggles there to impact them.
So, and looking at the suggestions that some of the faculty gave to us here of mandates or a requirement, potential of mandates and requiring attendance, one of the professors, when asked about this, she indicated, yes, that this is something that does need to happen, especially for these undergraduates. I mentioned earlier, Professor One, that he had also suggested this for undergraduate students as well. And we look here at this article from Trout, and one of the students that was interviewed for that article had noted, being forced to go to actual face-to-face classes helps me stay motivated. There's something when we were hearing from some of these faculty members where they can tell with these students that there's just a mind shift in knowing that I'm going to class still, I need to be focused on that, and I'm still engaged. That switch is still on essentially for their focus. And so that a recommendation from these faculty that yes, there should be a requirement of coming to class when you can and being able to attend as much as possible.
Right. So we want to look at, is there a connection there between mandating attendance and student engagement? And it's starting to become a little clearer there. We did actually speak with some of our student assistants that work here in our department, and one of them, quote, says, in general, I find that attendance, required or not, makes a difference in how I'm performing in the class. So the student has some self-awareness there that just showing up is going to impact her own involvement and engagement in her class and in her work. And she goes on to say that several of my professors have said, those who do attend the synchronous online meetings, and this is an online class, of course, versus watching the recorded lecture later, perform better. So it appears that students who are showing up on the time that the meeting is being held are more involved later on and do better later on. Then also from another faculty member here in our case studies, one faculty quoted that given the choice, that 15 of her students chose to go remote the entire time. So they said, I want to do this from online. But it was interesting to find out that 3 of the students that said, hey, I want to attend online, came back and said, I don't like attending online. This is not working for me. I need to be in the face-to-face classroom. So it was good that those students were recognizing that that is not working for them. So it might work for some, but it didn't work for them as far as staying engaged and motivated. So in conclusion, we are finding, it looks like from our research and from the research that's just recently been done, that for both students and faculty, attendance mandates may help them be engaged. Of course, we're looking at other variables here. We're looking at undergraduate versus graduate students, but regardless of whether this is going to be in a face-to-face classroom or if students are attending virtually, and that being present and being engaged is going to help students learn. Other variables might also include attending as far as asynchronously, but using those technological tools that would note when a student is in the classroom or what kinds of things the students are doing in the classroom based on what the tools can tell us. So there are a few variables there, but we're thinking that attendance mandates has an impact, a positive impact on student engagement. So we have another poll here. Will you require attendance in the spring? So we're curious to know, do you have plans already? And maybe we can have a discussion about what that looks like and how you're planning to take attendance. Are they still coming in?
I have just shared the results there.
Okay, this is very interesting. There are more people planning to take attendance than not, but then there's just as many people saying it depends. So maybe this is a good conversation to have, and maybe some things that we could discuss there. It depends. So as far as attendance goes, that's going to be our discussion here. Or if there are any other questions or comments, or actually, here's our references, and let's move on to the discussion. So someone tell me what it depends means for you as far as attendance for the spring.
Well, I'd like to I am not necessarily teaching face-to-face. So the question was very clearly face-to-face meeting. So I didn't know how to answer it. Okay. Right. So I'm teaching online, I teach synchronous, and I require attendance. So that's my answer, but I couldn't really answer it on the survey.
Okay. So you're teaching synchronously, you're teaching, you've got a way to deliver your lectures online, or using some kind of video?
All my lectures, so I teach flipped anyway, so all my lectures are already online. And then we do breakout and discussion and problem solving in class.
Mhm,
So it has to be synchronous.
mhm.
They can't do that asynchronously.
Okay.
And I require attendance.
And I'll mention we did talk to faculty as well who were teaching synchronously online. If it wasn't originally like we had many courses where they were originally scheduled to be face-to-face classes, that because of accommodations granted to the faculty members, that those courses were then moved to online synchronous. And for some of those faculty, they said yes, even for those, for those courses, if they can be required to be joining, especially if those courses were set up at certain times originally that they were going to be face-to-face, to be able to have those requirements if possible still. So if it's the course is set up for online asynchronous, that's one thing, that's fine. If it's going to be something though where students you can be able to have them be synchronous as well, we had some faculty saying that was a good idea to do, that they could see otherwise that some students over time would lose interest or just plan on watching the recordings, but that their engagement and their performance went down as well.
Y'all, I'm following the chat. There are a lot of questions inside the chat box. I think there's some fantastic observations in there too. But I'd also, just an offering. Over the past 3 weeks, Tristan Denley has been meeting with provosts, and so he has a team. I'm a part of that team, and we've been talking with provosts about their plans for the spring. So rather than a specific mandate, like you should do this or you will do this, it's been more a discussion about how best to maximize student engagement. And I'll tell you, we've gone through 2 sets of conversations separated by 2 weeks with each of the 26. And initially, the percentages have been 40-60, with 60 being online in early fall. And the most recent conversations, we're seeing a return to more face-to-face, a greater return. So now that the percentages are basically flipped, it's either 50-50 or 60-40 face-to-face as plans for the spring. So just a word, this is not something that provosts are being instructed, thou shalt. It's more like, make it work in terms of safety, in terms of faculty, in terms of students, with the kind of like the urge to move toward the face-to-face probably being the most optimum for most students, if that makes sense. It's difficult. This is not a simple discussion.
I see some folks talking about USG attendance policies, and I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. So if someone wants to unmute and talk about that, Jeff and I may be able to handle that question.
Please repeat the question.
In the chat, I see folks talking about USG's attendance policy and how do they make decisions about attendance when USG has attendance policies that you have to follow.
This is Matthew from Georgia Gwinnett College. Some of the comments, maybe I'm missing it, but it seems to me most of the comments about USG attendance policy is more about the BOR resolution that hybrid courses will have an active component that are face-to-face. That there will be a clear transparency about the mode of instruction. And the problem I have as a chair in talking to my faculty, we've gone to them and said, hey, what can we do to encourage students to get involved, to get engaged? What it seems to come down to is many faculty don't think it's safe to go back or to require their students to go back when cases are spiking. So their comment is really, look, we want to engage the students, but if we don't feel like it's safe, trying to force students to come to the classroom when they themselves don't want to come back. Like a lot of students, as soon as you post a syllabus and say, I'm teaching a hybrid class, will email and say, are you going to force me to come, or will there be a virtual option? What we said earlier in the session, as soon as you offer a virtual option, other students see that too. And what we saw this last semester is many of them migrate to the virtual option. So we're stuck with this issue of how do you conform to a BR resolution with people on campus if the students themselves don't want to be on campus and the faculty don't feel like it's safe. We can talk about really great activities we can do face-to-face. We can talk about wonderful ways to engage students. I mean, we all know wonderful pedagogical things we can do face-to-face. Georgia Gwinnett traditionally is all face-to-face. That's all we do. But in this environment, unless you mandate attendance in face-to-face sessions without giving a virtual option for that gradable component, I don't think you're going to get low attendance face-to-face. That's what I'm struggling with. So I'd love to have ideas about that.
Yeah, Matthew, to add to that, I was one of the people who wrote a comment about this. I'm with Columbus State University. I don't think there's a specific phrase that says there's a USG mandate, neither there is one at CSU, but there's an implicit expectation, and I think the word that has been used here is quote unquote flexibility, meaning that we have to be able to offer all these pathways and options for them to complete the course. But there's pressure, at least here, as I understand it, for us to be present in the classroom. And so, I mean, that's what I mean by reconciling, you know, what we know are pedagogic, because I'm not surprised by your findings and the research you consulted. Yes, students who are attending do better, they're more engaged. But I feel a sense of from either the USG or my institution, sometimes it's unclear what's coming from where, that there's an expectation that we keep them on campus, but that we're also flexible in not requiring them to be present. And so it's to me, that is contradictory and almost impossible to really accommodate. And that's where I see kind of, I mean, I see some benefit in what you're saying, but at the same time, logistically, I find myself kind of torn in knowing how to implement it in my context.
Can I make just one comment here on that? Is, you know, this the flexibility, I think, is, you know, we're looking at this generally because of the health concern, right? And so this can be something where we can tell students, you know, it is best to be here in class if you can. We understand if you can't because of health reasons. That is completely understood. But if you're able to be here, please come and be able to let students know we're seeing the results of this here. That, you know, you were, especially more for these undergraduates, I would say a lot of the freshman students in particular that we're hearing from faculty that, you know, this is going to benefit you. This is maybe the optimum choice here. So we have the flexibility available. And I think maybe that's a key thing here is the availability of the flexibility, but still be able to have them here if possible. And of course, and in no way are we trying to say this as far as like, therefore, I should have mentioned too, we're trying to indicate this towards faculty of here's what we suggest for you in your classes. We're not trying to make statements here about, or therefore USG should do this. That is nothing like that, of course. This is our recommendations to faculty on based off of what we've seen. So.
And I think there are, you know, 100 reasons why students are not persisting in coming to class. And some, I'm sure, are very much tied to, you know, their obligations at home. They have complicated, you know, situations that might keep them from coming to class. And let's face it, dialing into a meeting is easier than getting in your car and driving to campus and finding a place to park and walk into your building. So, you know, I think there are definitely things that keep students from coming to class that are tied to their home situation, their other obligations, but also maybe just because it's easier to stay home. And, you know, what the students are saying often is that if they are encouraged, or forced is maybe a strong word, but, you know, if there's a reason to come to campus, they kind of appreciate it because it keeps them from taking the easy way out, which then results in them maybe dropping off mid-semester, kind of like that article that Jamie Landau just put in the chat from Faculty Focus.
Could I make a comment, please?
Of course.
This is Beverly Eskridge. I'm a librarian at Gordon State. And of course, we have very few users here. but the students that we call our little favorite library users, students who are in the library a lot that feel that they can talk and vent to us, and they're angry. Quite a few students are angry that they signed up for face-to-face or some type of hybrid, and they get here and they've moved in the residence hall, and then they find that the professor has decided to go all online. And one student told me that I could have taken online classes at home. I didn't have to make the effort to come here and move in. And he said, I wanted to be on campus. I don't learn well this way. And so we have had students who are just the opposite. They want to be here. They have problems at home. They say it's a zoo. They don't have good internet. There's kids, there, and it's noisy. And so we recently had a couple more students who tested positive. And so now our dining hall is completely shut down as far as going in and sitting down and eating. You have to go in and get your food to go, and you have to walk quite a distance back to your residence hall to eat. And we've actually had some students say, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going home. I'll just finish it online. So I'm seeing kind of a different thought from our students. They actually realize they don't do well when it's only online. So they want to have the whole experience, and they feel that they've been cheated, and they've actually used the phrase, we were lied to. So, so it goes the other way too. Thanks.
I think that's a good point, and that I think that is probably a big reason why the resolution said transparency, so that students knew. So the students knew exactly the format and mode of their courses, so that they're not sitting in a dorm room paying for their dorms, and being completely online. And it's tricky because there's a lot of students who are expressing that same upset that you just mentioned, Beverly, that they want the college experience. I mean, the thing is, we can't have the real college experience right now. Even if we are on campus, we have masks and we're 6 feet apart, and we can't have our socials and we can't have our parties, and it's not going to be, and it can't be the traditional experience. But I think that transparency may be the most important thing, is so that students know what they're getting into. They can maybe register for the course that is being taught in the mode that fits with what works for them, as opposed to signing up and then finding out later that it's not what they thought it was.
The problem is our students, we had transparency, we thought, but our students are just, they don't have a lot of empathy for some of our faculty who are older, and they've made comments about that, and it's like some things Gordon had no control over, and they don't seem to, they want to blame the administration. They want to blame someone that they know, just saying the Board of Regents said. And so we're seeing that too. They're often students have want things done immediately. And so this has been just a whole different world. And we're having to take your temperature. You take your temperature when you come in. You sign in the computer so you can be traced, and you have to distance, and you have to wear your masks, and it's a lot, and on us, it's a lot of checking to make sure they're doing these things. And so far, they've been very nice when you say, pull that mask up, and you have to separate. We've fixed the furniture. They moved the furniture. So, but overall, they have adjusted well. But when they leave the library, other buildings aren't as strict with enforcing the rules. And they've had like an election results party, and the 2 people that supposedly are sick now were at that party, according to students. So you hear things from students. So there seems to be sometimes a lack of consistency enforcing policies. And so So we think they're doing well here, but when they leave here, maybe not so much. And you have to try to tell them that to stay in class and have a chance to be on campus, we have to all follow the rules. So it's put us in a different role than we're used to having in the library. But like I say, so far, it's not been a major problem, but they want to come back and they want to be the way it used to be, like a lot of us do, but they aren't accepting that it may not be. And faculty have said in meetings, it doesn't matter if you say the class is going to be face-to-face, something could change, or that professor might have to not be face-to-face. So I think our students are going to have to maybe adjust their thinking a little bit.
I think there have been some really good points raised. And I know for myself, having come into actually a new teaching position at Georgia Southern University, I had to learn from scratch the MLS system of Folio, which was somewhat challenging. So I can imagine professors who maybe have never taught online having an extreme challenge in this time. So I think the grace for both not only students, but also each other and students towards professors should be something that we all kind of need to recognize maybe. The other thing too is I was grateful to have taken some trainings right before this with AQ and QM, which I highly recommend. But I think that, having options for students is really helpful. So for instance, I've allowed my students to come in person or be online as they feel comfortable. And of course, a lot of them haven't shown up, but at the end of the day, I don't think they can necessarily blame me for giving them options. So if they really want a face-to-face experience, it is offered to them. But if they want to be online and they feel more comfortable, that is also offered to them. So I think I'm trying to be very flexible, and probably other people are as well. I really don't see how it's possible to hold people accountable for an attendance. I only put yes in the poll because we do have the initial yes to, if whether or not, they will be charged for financial aid. At the end of the day, we have to report if people are going to be taking our class. But beyond that, I think some of the daily and weekly assignments should speak for themselves as far as if they keep up with the work, because that's the most important. Whether that's submitting it online or if it's in person or whatever. But I've just chosen to put everything online just for bookkeeping purposes, making it easy on my life, because I can't imagine, collecting papers in person and then trying to get grade ones that are submitted online. I'm just trying to streamline things for myself. So hopefully some of these suggestions that I've taken away and have actually helped will help other people on the chat. I know we're all trying to figure it out. And it seems really weird because we're all in our isolated bubbles trying to figure out how we're going to teach our classes. But these are the things I've kind of noticed that, if I work with the students, I think they're pretty willing to work with us. So anyway, I hope that helps.
Thank you. I just wanted to throw this out there. It's coming up on time to close, but in more than one of the research articles that we read, we were seeing that students were saying, well, I'll take my gen ed courses online and then I'll come to campus for other more discipline related types of courses. So I thought that was an interesting thing to read, that students might have an awareness that I want to do this online and then I want to do this in the face-to-face classroom. So any thoughts on that?
I saw someone put in the chat way up at the top, just that they wondered if upper level courses had more attendance, kind of in the same way that the grad courses were.
Yeah, my fear would be just the opposite, that students who have the least connection to the institution might disappear more readily in the first 2 years than those that already have a clear path, a track. So for 10 years, I taught at Oxford College over at Emory. And my thinking with this, if I were teaching right now, my comp courses or my lit crit classes, my seminar in place, I would be thinking, what's the added value, the value added for students to be in my class face to face? And so what comes back to me over and over again is I think, and I think several have mentioned this, is that what's the unpacking that happens face to face that happens less regularly when we're online. I've used online a lot. Blended learning is the way is how I structured my classes. Assignments are online. I like the idea of collecting compositions, assignments in that space. Iterative composition assignments can unfold pretty readily in the virtual space. So the reason that I really enjoyed the face-to-face is that I could unpack things that were more difficult for students. The complexities, what Nosich called fundamental and powerful concepts. So the things at the heart of a class or a course that students are simply, they don't have a frame for that. Even if they're advanced students at an R1, they still need a good bit of unpacking and contextualization. So if I were teaching now, I think the way that I would approach this is safety first, and then what are the things in my discipline, my course, this specific course, that students would really benefit from hearing me talk about face-to-face, reading facial expressions, answering questions, going deep, kind of like an introduction to the discipline through this course.
If I could add or mention, so we alluded to a little bit some of the research that we were seeing, or what we were hearing from faculty, and also what we were seeing published recently, as far as those, especially freshman students, as being students who were struggling with this, or that faculty were seeing. But again, it wasn't just about the fact that they're not being there, but that how they were struggling afterwards because of it, not submitting assignments or missing tests, other things like that. Those challenges. And if you think about the work that's often done with first-year students in general, even in regular times, that the work that's done to help with those new students at an institution, that we already do so much, because those are the students who, especially let's say they're first generation students, this is new. The whole setup of an institution of higher education is new to them. And years ago, I worked as a resident assistant in a dorm. I remember the amount of work that's put into helping those students to acclimatize, to become comfortable with higher education, and they're still figuring out, they're making their way at an institution like this. And so to be able to then also give them, that was one of the things we were seeing from some of the research, was that amount of flexibility suddenly being pushed on, or well, not so much pushed, I shouldn't say that, but being offered to students who may not be ready for that yet. That was one of the biggest takeaways, at least for me, was that it's those students in particular who may be the most vulnerable here.
Can I ask a question about some of Jeff's comments, and also Randy, some of yours? It seems like the general tone I get is that most people, please correct me if I'm wrong, are saying we really don't want to force students to be on campus or in the classroom so much as we want to encourage them to kind of highlight the importance, the value, the engagement, some of what they may not even realize, maybe providing some articles or just telling them this is really important for you. So strong encouragement. But the question I have is, if you do that, and then you have 2 or 3 students who are enrolled and say, hey, I really want to do well in this class, but I don't feel safe coming to campus. Can I do a virtual component? Once we say yes, which I did this last semester, I ended up trying to do these real face-to-face engagement issues, but I'm also doing a Zoom or a Blackboard Collaborate simultaneously. So I'm tied to my computer screen, and I'm trying to do this with a mask on while trying to do things out here in the room. And any idea that I'm going to do a face-to-face session that has some extraordinary value that's not going to be in the virtual world seemed to be impossible, because I'm serving 2 masters simultaneously. So I really struggled with that, and I struggle with, I'm going to read that article about focus that was sent with some strategies, but I guess my question to the group is, A, did I hear the message right? That most of, if not all of you are saying encourage, don't require. Did I hear that right? And secondly, if you do that, how do you deal with the fact that some of your students are not in those face-to-face sessions, but you're trying to help them simultaneously? Thanks.
Dr. Gell, Jeff, did you want to respond to that first, or I can, but I wanted to let you go first, obviously. Well, okay, so go ahead, please.
If I had been in the classroom this past semester or spring, I would probably have a much better answer for that question, Matthew. I think it is spot on. If we're encouraging students to come back to class for their benefit, but there are several who have safety concerns, or maybe they have been raised in an online environment that is really robust, that is really great. So how do we accommodate these two different audiences? I'm having to struggle with that. I think there are some suggestions, some techniques. I know that supplemental instruction, having a student in the class to monitor the monitor, there are some techniques that can help, but I'll defer to you, Randy. Go ahead and see what you have to say on that one.
I'm seeing some comments here from the in the chat as well on this here. So this is something where, you know, when we had Dr. Brian Beatty talk to our faculty about this, and it's something, you know, if you look on the Chronicle of Higher Education going back to April, for example, where suddenly, you know, what's this HighFlex thing? I've never heard of this, and suddenly nationwide you hear a lot of discussion on this, right? And I think a key point on this, I think a lot of people were looking at it as, oh, okay, that's our solution. We'll do that. Mm-hmm. And he himself was saying, well, it's intended for this. Adapt it to what's going to work for you in your class. So, for instance, if I was suggesting this right now, it'd be, well, you know, if I'm working with those freshmen, and again, like I mentioned, you know, I've worked with, you know, I've taught in the classroom, and I've taught usually the classes I was teaching were higher level, but I've also, or I should say upperclassmen, but you know, I teach also online with students who are, you know, first-year students, or who are, you know, maybe adults, but who are brand new to education. They're some of the most vulnerable students, and it's very easy for them to fall off. And for students, as the article you see there on the shared screen from Gannon, which is a really good article, he talks about the fact that you have these students who, they may have had less than an optimal online experience this past spring when they were finishing up high school, and they suddenly come here. There's all kinds of things working against these students right now, right? And so, you know, for some of these students, it's something where we say we absolutely should have that flexibility for these students right now. But then it can also be something where we say, if you're sick, we of course understand that. But if you get better, if you're able to be past that, please come back, because we've seen how beneficial it will be for you to be here. And we want to do all we can to help you out with that. And so, you know, reaching out to those students and be able to help that. And so, you know, and be able to tell them, maybe explicitly say, we have this option because we want to be able to have you still with us while you are facing that challenge. And, you know, to be able to give that flexibility so that you can come back if possible. And that's just me speaking on that right there, but that's also having spoken with some of our other faculty, who some of them recommended this much stronger than I'm saying it right now, believe me. Some of them were saying, no, we have to mandate it because they were seeing that in comparison undergraduate versus graduate. But just be able to give that kind of flexibility, and then be able to tell them, we're seeing how important it is, especially for you as a freshman, how important it is for you to be here. And what that's, and again, there is nothing that's blanket statement about this. What happens in your classroom is different from what happens in someone else's. And that specific student you're talking to is different from somebody else.
And I want to derail the conversation a little bit. We have just another minute, but I want to derail it by saying, not only do we have instructor-student interaction going on here and working with students with instructors, but student to student. Remember that in the class that I'm teaching, we have discussions, and then we have synchronous meetings. Those are optional, right? You can come if you can. but students are learning that if they're going to earn extra points on discussions, they're going to be able to reply to each other in discussions and get that conversation going. And for me, I think that that ties to their attendance factor. So knowing that they're helping each other in the discussions, yeah, they may show up at the synchronous meetings too and have some more conversations there. So
I think that's a great point. That's what I used to always tell my students is that, you know, if one single one of you is not here for the discussion is different. It changes the whole dynamics of the class because everyone's experiences and life and interpretations change the way that we all come out of this experience together. So I like that idea of helping them realize their importance. Well, we are out of time, and if we have learned nothing in this hour, it is that there is probably no one solution, but hopefully, as Robert Potter just said in the chat, thanks, Robert, that it's hopefully we've given you some things to think about as we move forward into the spring. So thanks so much, Jennifer and Randy. This was great. And thanks to everyone who participated in the conversation. Just to let you know, we have one more webinar on perusal, and this is with Eric Mazur, who is noted physicist and educator at Harvard. It is on our website. Let me just drop that in the chat real quick, where you can register for this. It is being facilitated by Lauren Barbeau from Georgia Southern here, who's been a big advocate and user of perusal, and to the point where she caught their attention and they said, hey, let's do something together. So I just put that in the chat for how you can register for that last session in our fall webinar series. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.